Okay, there we go. All right. So the gang's all here. We've got some items on the agenda. Mark, since you're not feeling great, why don't you go first and just knock it out of the way? Get it over with.
Get it
Um,
done. Sounds good. What did I have on the agenda? So 0.11 release finally rolled out, which is awesome. Yay. So thank you to everyone that contributed and all the hard work that went into testing, etc., etc. So that's fun. We're breaking stuff. We're trying to make it so we break stuff less. But what was I going to say? But we have some good stuff in here, including the Unity SDK, which has been long awaited. So I'm sure there's some people who are pretty excited about that. And probably the other fun one that we've had a lot of requests for, or at least I have very much directly, which is the port pass-through. So for a lot of legacy systems, they like to start up on this, like to report the what's the word? Same. They like to report to a main registration service what port they started on, and that's the port that they expect that people will connect on. Before we had that was a problem because it would start on an arbitrary, like a port 2600 or something, and then the port that Agones would assign would be random, and that would suck. So port pass-through allows those two numbers to be the same, and that makes a lot of people really happy. So for legacy game servers, which is good. Speaking of breaking changes, then I can probably move into the next one, which is like 0.12, which is trying to make things not be breaking anymore, because we have some breaking changes in the pipeline. But looking at the things we have left that are listed in our in our next milestone, which is basically everything we were looking at for 1.0. I think what was the word I was going to say? I think we can probably aim for this to be a 1.0, assuming we get everything done. It may or may not work. But I think from what we've outlined as 1.0, or at least stable API surface, which I think we can call a 1.0, we can get it done, which is pretty cool. So there's a bit more work there to do, and a bunch of try and get those breaking changes done, particularly around like moving groups and the CRDs and that kind of stuff. But once that's done, I think we could potentially call it 1.0, which is pretty good. I think at the very least we could probably do, if not this release, then the one after it. I think that would definitely hit. Actually, one thing that I was thinking about that we should mention in here at some point, that the CRDs should actually move from V1 Alpha 1 to V1 once we're at a 1.0 stage. And there'll be a little bit of refactoring work for that.
At least the stable ones should, right?
Yeah, the stable ones. I don't think any of them really should have changed in a long time.
I think some of the multi-cluster ones are a little bit.
Oh, true. The multi-cluster,
right? We might not want to mark those.
That's a good point. No, that's a fair point. That's totally a fair point. But I think that's my stuff.
Did you want to talk about 0.12 possibly being 1.0?
Yeah. Didn't I say that?
That's what I just said, yeah.
Okay, sorry. I confess I had a Slack message from Cyril, so I was being good and responding.
Cyril, what is it? Cyril is attending the event through hash users.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's like this now conflicts with a meeting he has, a stand-up. So probably going forward, we'll move it like 30 minutes later to start so he can attend. But yeah, I told him we were recording and he could watch it later. So
you can also come join it. You can join 30 minutes late.
Yeah, if we go, who knows? Sometimes we're just fast.
We're very fast.
Okay, so my stuff. Is anybody going to OzCon?
I'm not going to OzCon.
Okay, that's totally fine. Basically, OzCon, Portland in about a month. And the reason I ask is we've got the Google booth there, and we're doing some office hours and stuff as part of that overall programming. And one of the slots is for kind of just to meet up and talk about open source and gaming. So hopefully we'll have some other folks there that join up, and we're trying to get this movement started. but there's not, we don't have any talks at the event, unfortunately. But we will have some sort of informal, meetups and things like that. So the other one is the open source and gaming. I don't want to call it a day because it's a half day. So open source and gaming at the Open Source Summit, which is San Diego in August. If you are interested to go, let me know. We did have some passes. We did have some passes for our team that some of which have been spoken for, but I'm sure I can get more if we would like. Mark and I are both going to go to the full conference. It is a good conference if you're interested in kind of the philosophical side of open source, rather than, technology, where KubeCon, of course, is pretty much all Kubernetes and other projects. So definitely check it out. We're excited about the Open Source Gaming Day. Mark's speaking, and I think we've got one with Unity as well. And Mark's speaking twice, so Mark's like half as a.
I am. Oh, exciting!
Because you have the keynote, and then you have.
Oh yeah, I should write that.
So yeah, Mark's the headliner. But if you're definitely interested in going, let me know. And then the next thing we have on here was an update on the new GitHub org. Has everybody, your stars and everything should have migrated over. So hopefully you've seen it and not had any issues with it. We have 3 repos now. So there's one for the core, one for documentation, and one for community stuff. On the community stuff side, I'm working on migrating some of our existing documentation over to that one, and also adding some new stuff in. On the website side, Mark and I discussed it, and I told him we could wait until after 1.0 before we try to migrate over all of that code. But long range, it's good for us, one, it should make builds and everything go faster, and then it'll be good for having some of the automation in. Like, I know we've been talking about Prow, and then once we get that in, we can do some of the cool stuff like Kubernetes has, and have some of the little bots that run around and help out with stuff. And then it also can smooth the process for people requesting to be, maintainers and members and things like that. So we've got some cool stuff in mind for it, but we're just kind of in that, holding pattern of not making too many wild changes until 1.0 ships. But everything should be pretty smooth sailing at this point. We had a couple of hiccups right afterwards, but I think everything's smoothed out now. But if you see any weirdness, of course, just always let us know.
It's been fine.
Oh, Mark froze. While he's coming back, I was going to ask a question, April. I was noticed that in the org itself, there are no people as part of the org. I don't know if that's intentional, if we just haven't gotten to it yet. I know that with Prow in particular, you have to have people in the org for them to be able to use the Prow bots.
And there's probably a good argument to be made. Hangouts just did something weird. I don't know what happened. Go ahead, Robert.
You cut out for
and then you came back all at once.
So I was going to say, in Kubernetes land, they have sort of this graduation process. Like you said, it would be good for us to promote more maintainers, but there's also a process of becoming an org member as well, where an org member gives you lower level privileges. And I think that we should write down what we think that promotion process should look like, maybe in that community repo that you created. Or maybe there's an open match community repo and an Agones community repo. And since this is an org-wide thing, maybe there needs to be an org-wide community repo or somewhere where this is written down of when you start working on the project, after you've sent a couple pull requests, please request to be added to the org, and we can get you added to the org, and that will give you these new capabilities, right?
Yeah, because the org is Google owned, there are some lockdown security considerations that the Open Source Program Office has for us. So, we can't do quite as much as Kubernetes does, since theirs is owned by CNCF. But we'll definitely look at, kind of the different processes. I know for most of the external folks, they're being added as contributors. But, we can certainly.
You could probably set them up with just read access or something, can't we?
Well, I was going to say, like, we'll just see what we can get away with.
Okay.
But
Yeah. Well, that was always an issue.
Definitely. I mean, once we get past the 1.0, I would love to you and I sit down and kind of talk through, since you have so much experience with how Kubernetes had it set up. And there's some specific things that they have that we do want, and there's some that we don't. So.
Right. Yeah, I know that. Like, I was always hesitant to suggest adding people to the Google Cloud Platform org, because that seemed like a very most of the members were Googlers and not other contributors. And I guess I'm hoping that the Google for Games, we can be a little bit more it's everybody working on the projects, not just Google people. And so hopefully that's okay with OSPO, and especially if, like Mark was saying, if we can at least add people with read access so they can be attributed to the org and people can know that they are working on this stuff, I think that would be great for sort of visibility and people sort of self-promotion as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So I'll dig into that a little more on my side, just to see exactly what all the rules and regulations are. And then once we do get past 1.0, like I said, I'd love to, you and I kind of dive into this and get everything automated and running quickly. One thing, actually, while we're on this topic, I had put something in Slack. I don't know if it was last week. I'm not sure if anybody noticed, but Mark and I were looking at Push Panda.
Oh, I saw a note about that. I've never seen Push Panda before. It looked kind of interesting, though.
It's got a panda. I mean, what could possibly be wrong, right?
Well, it's also from GitHub, which is
they bought
good,
it,
right?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes more sense.
Right. But basically the concept is that it will, it's a panda that's very cute and comes along and it's like, hey, you haven't done this yet. So it's kind of a, automated alternative to us saying, hey, I need these things reviewed. If no one has any major objections, we were thinking about just turning it on for a while and seeing if we liked it. If it gets to be too noisy or annoying, of course, we can turn it off. But, in theory, it seemed like it could be useful. And some other repos I'm part of, people seem to speak highly of it. So.
Yeah, I certainly would object. I think having any sort of automation, whether it's stuff that we've built or stuff that GitHub is providing to us, it helps prevent people from having to do the same thing over and over is great.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Cool. Yeah, then I say
I wanted to speak to a point you brought up previously, which was, where was it? Splitting up the repo, so we would have community and docs and stuff. It's maybe worth writing up a ticket on this, because there's probably a bunch of stuff that we could potentially split, and it's probably worth a conversation, especially around the client, moving the client SDKs. We may want to keep those separate from the main project and have that be separate, and maybe some stuff there. So there may be worth a conversation happening there to just work out what we want to do, or maybe the phases we want to do it in, or that kind of stuff, because there's some tooling that'll need to get moved around as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's, every project does it a little differently. So it's whatever works. That's the other advantage, is we can make as many repos as we want now.
Yeah.
But I do want to make sure that they stay somewhat as the org grows.
Yeah. Do you think we want to do something that's I know how Kubernetes has that thing where they have multiple repos, but it's all pushed out from the main, or do we not, has that been a pain for people? Or do we want to just keep them in separate repos and just have them in separate repos and it doesn't matter?
I think Kubernetes is mostly doing that because that's a stepping stone to actually moving it out.
Okay. Just curious.
That's kind of like a intermediate step that they've been stuck in now for probably over a year. But the goal is to actually split things out. And again, the longer you wait to do it, the harder it becomes, and they wait a long time. And so it's hard at this point.
Yep.
That's true. Okay. Yeah, good point. Okay, I'll add that to our, maybe we can create a little working group of GitHub.
Yeah, we could
organization, and anybody who's interested we can dive into that after 1.0.
Yeah, I could also just do a meta ticket or something on Agones and talk it through.
That works too.
Whatever works. Cool.
Awesome. Any other questions or anything about GitHub? Otherwise, I'm gonna put in Push Panda, and we'll see if the panda stays or goes. All right, Stephen and Robert have the rest of it. Stephen's got a few things, so you want to take it away, Stephen?
Yeah, sure. Hello again. So I just wanted to follow up on the last meeting. I think then we said that we would support Kubernetes 1.12, but actually we're still on 1.11. We're running 1.12 in production. It doesn't seem to make much difference, but I think as all the cloud providers are on 1.13 now, it might be time to move up to 1.12.
Yeah, I made a note of that on one of the tickets that's happened. I think it only happened in the last few weeks, which is good. I think it's a question of how hard we're pushing for 1.0 on the next release, and if we're doing that, where in the priority queue we want to stick that. I think it's just a question of how much work we have done. But yeah, that's been on my roadmap too, and I think I've got a ticket.
I think for pushing on the 1.0 release, we should flip the default to 1.12. I think 1.12 has some improvements over 1.11, especially related to scheduling that we should probably just pick up for 1.0 and do all of our testing and validation against 1.12. And so I think maybe, Steve, what you're saying is like, let's flip all the CI to 1.12 and just say like that's the version we're supporting. That's what you guys are running. I think that's the default version in GKE, which I think is a pretty good signal from Google that it's a pretty stable version of Kubernetes. 1.15 just shipped, so it's a couple of versions old at this point. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to say let's set the baseline at 1.12, at least for this next release, and hopefully for 1.0, move forward from there.
Yeah,
I think that sounds like that's aligned with what you guys are wanting to run in production anyway, and you guys would be happy making sure that version is working and stable.
Yeah, the only thing that I was looking at that would probably take a little bit of time is I think, at least on GKE anyway, we have a bunch of new defaults for 1.12 or different defaults, like node upgrades, for example, which we probably want to have turned off. We probably don't want nodes auto updating while game servers are on them. That would be bad. So we just need to document that as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think there are a bunch of flag defaults that change. Like I've been working with Jeremy a little bit on the open match side, as from their sort of CI and their build files to tinker with those too. So
yeah, we'll need to update our docs on that.
Yeah, I can help work on that. It's not too difficult. There's only like 3 or 4 things that we need to worry about.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, in that case, we're not really trying to capitalize on any features in 1.12. It's just, I think that was the default on GKE, so that's what we went with.
It definitely has some scheduler improvements that should definitely help as well.
So yeah, next point, just wanted to give an update on where we are as running Agones in production. So our game's been on early access on Google in a few countries, and we just did it on the iPhone as well, just in Malaysia and Philippines. So we're starting to get a lot more traffic because that's not early access; it's just open to those countries. Seems to be going all right. We're getting about 1 matchmaking request per second. I don't know how many of those are kind of retries versus people actually going in, but this is the point where we start to see we're running multiple game servers. So each game server typically has up to 50 players. So we might have up to 4 of those running at a time, and we start to see some of the scheduling issues that with Agones. But of course, we're a little bit behind. We're still on 0.90. And 0.10's next week. I think we might also try and get to 0.11 as that's now gone live, because that fixes some more of our bugs. But yeah, really happy so far. I'm really happy with the support on Slack that we've been getting as well. So that's good. And hopefully we can find some other weird issues and create tickets for those.
Thank you for finding the weird issues.
Yeah,
yeah, that's awesome and really exciting.
Yeah, and then the point of embarrassment, we're not really we didn't set up the metrics yet. I've just been looking at the docs, so that's something we should do. We're using Stackdriver, so it looks like it integrates with that. Okay.
Yeah, the annoying thing about Stackdriver is that it doesn't come with dashboards because there's no API for creating dashboards, which is irritating. But yeah, you just kind of have to handle your own, and that's just the way it is, and that sucks. But there's nothing we can do about it.
Okay. There seems to be, perhaps a question on that. There seem to be like 2 stack drivers, like the new stack driver but with Kubernetes integration and the legacy. I don't know which one Agones works best with.
I'd have to look at the docs. I didn't write it.
I mean, I guess we'll try. I think we're still on the legacy stack driver dashboard.
I don't know if it matters, actually. I think that's more what metrics you get out of Kubernetes itself. I don't think we actually care from the Agones point of view. I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then just something cool we're trying to do with our game. So we have games that like anyone can join. So our matchmaker will just find the first game server that's available. So these are ones that are either in an allocated state, or if not, it'll pick a ready one and turn that into allocated, and then start filling that one up. But a new feature we're going to add is sort of like a start your own game with friends. So someone will create a game, and then they'll send a code to their friends, and the friends will be able to join that, and they'll actually join the game server, and it's in a kind of lobby state. And then when the leader's ready, they'll click go, and then that game server will just convert to like a regular game server. So I think we can achieve this just using our own labels. I think we'll still use that, we'll still go from ready to allocated, but the game server will just be in lobby mode, and then we'll label it as private or not private. But, that was the sort of thinking on that, but yeah. I guess, yeah, maybe a bit different. How we do matchmaking is a little different. Like, we're not using open match or any of those things, but sort of seems to work well with the Agones so far.
Yes, Mark, that does beg the question of, if we did decide there should be another state that was optional between sort of ready and allocated, are we convinced we could add that in a backwards compatible fashion? Like once we cut 1.0?
We probably could, given that, what was the word? We're doing reserved, which is like at times like don't delete this, but also don't fire off the autoscaler.
Right.
And that's not affecting anything else.
Okay.
So that's there.
I think we could. I'm just wondering if you know of any like weird edge cases in the code that like, some of the state machine stuff is a little bit too exposed or hard coded that we couldn't add new states.
Not that I can think of.
Because I know that's one of the sort of pitfalls people can get into with states in Kubernetes, is that the state machine itself becomes sort of too visible to clients in a way that if you try to change it, it will break clients.
Yeah. Each state tends to correspond kind of to almost like a command rather than an actual flow from one to the other.
Right.
Within Agones, it's not like Agones doesn't really expect a flow per se. It's more like, oh, it's ready. That means that we can do this. Oh, it's allocated. It means we can't do this. Oh, it's shut down. Okay, we'll shut down. Like,
yeah, I think that's a much better way to do it, because then you can add new states that, if it's in this state, now we have new behavior, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So maybe that's something, Steve, as you guys go forward, is if this becomes something that you think would make sense sort of more broadly, or should be sort of part of Agones itself, to open a ticket and say, like, we think that there might be this new sort of, state that we want to add to the system.
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting balancing act of not making sure that we don't add like 17 million states.
Exactly. Right. That's where like we need to make sure that it's generally applicable and it's not sort of just a one-off thing.
Cool. Yeah. I think we'll probably start. I guess we can use our own label for now as sort of custom, like a sort of user space, and then see if that's worthwhile.
See that flows through.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, so I think I've got the next couple. I was just going through sort of the issue backlog this morning and trying to see if there was anything we should discuss during the meeting. The first one, I think this is really important before we can call things 1.0, and I know that Mark has sort of started working on this, although you didn't assign the issue to yourself, so I can't tell if you're planning on finishing it, which is splitting the API groups out. So I saw the first PR got merged like along that pathway, but I was curious sort of what the status is from your side, whether you want help to get this done, or whether you're going to finish it.
I will always take help. Help is excellent. So yes, I did the fleet autoscaler one because that was the easiest. Sucked, but it was fine. I found, I hit pain points mainly because whatchamacallit, we're not using a tool like QBuilder, and there were things that I'd forgotten that needed to be changed in various places. Now I remember where all that stuff is, but I can help people work through it. I'm currently focusing on trying to get the that reservation distributed matchmaking stuff done. Just because that's been there for a while too. So if somebody wants to pick up some of the other ones, please go right ahead. That's definitely work that can be distributed. The other one that's going to be a big chunk of work in the vein of this, I think, is moving moving game server to what is it, to using the status CRD as well. That's gonna, I think Alex just started that and then backed away slowly in terror. Which I don't necessarily blame you for.
Yeah, so really don't want to break something. So,
So it sounds like I might have to do that, which is fine. Yeah.
I think the other similar thing to this that you mentioned earlier is moving from the V1 Alpha 1 to V1 for some of the API groups. And so that's going to be sort of a similar renaming and conversion potentially that we need to do, right?
Do we want to do that together? I don't know.
I mean, maybe not in the same PR, but maybe over the same release, because that requires people that are upgrading to only have to do one change.
That's true. That is true.
Which would be nice. So if we could squeeze both of those in between .11 and .12, then when Steve has to upgrade from .11 to .12, he's already going to have to rename things because they're moving API groups, but you only have to rename them to the V1 version where in the destination group name.
That is true. That is true. I am a little worried about like this renaming work tends to be tricky and painful, and trying to get that done in the next sprint. That's the thing that definitely concerns me the most. I feel pretty confident we can do it, at least if not in this sprint, then in both sprints. But I don't know. It would be. I'd love to get to a stable API surface. That would make me very happy.
I agree. Okay. So I guess the call for action there is for folks that are on the line or listening later to go to issue number 703, and maybe we can use the issue to say like I'm working on this part, so that people aren't duplicating effort. Both trying to do the same part and not realizing. So if you want to help, please coordinate on that issue. And maybe Mark, if you want to update the issue with like here are the ones that are remaining and maybe like how difficult like your swag is at them, so people like I'd love to do one, but I don't want to do the hardest one, right? At least not first. So you said you did what you thought was the easiest one first. Maybe like you could list like the next sort of easiest ones and people can pick those up.
Yeah. I think actually the next one is moving everything from stable into agones.dev.
Okay.
Which is like all of them.
Yes, that's like the rest, right?
That is the rest. I have got rid of fleet allocations. There's a PR in place right now to get rid of that. So that's going to make life easier. But yeah, I can write some notes on there.
Okay. Cool. So the next thing I found, issue number 613, which was not tagged with the .12 milestone, but it was about sort of taking something away, which to me signals like this might be an issue with deprecation and compatibility if we do it later. So do we want to try to do this before 1.0? I think this issue was open like quite a few months ago, back in February, by you, Mark, and you and Cyril were kind of going back and forth about it. So is this something that we're still interested in? Do we want to try to do it now? Is it something that we don't think will break backwards compatibility if we do it later?
So I have a few thoughts on this. One of which is I'd be curious, given the scheduler changes in 1.12, this may be a lesser issue. So we could probably just leave it. I'd be curious to see what packing looks like in 1.12 as well, and how well it works or not, or how much of an impact it has. Because if it doesn't have an impact, maybe we just leave it and it's fine. I think backward compatibility wise, the API surface doesn't change if we get rid of it. Just how fleets scale up will come up in a slightly different way. Me, I don't know how people feel about that.
Yeah, so I guess like the semantic difference, right? Like if the behavior changes, do people think that that's a breaking change, or is that just a behavioral change that we view as an improvement, right?
Yeah. But I think I'd like to see what the performance impacts of retaining that versus not retaining it, and see whether that's a trade-off we want to make, or if it does it right now, like we do the pod affinity stuff so that when we spin up game servers in packed mode, they kind of go together as much as possible. Like that scheduler is not perfect. It does a decent job. Maybe it does a better job with the new scheduler. Maybe it does a worse job. If it does a worse job, then maybe we don't even care. So I think it just requires testing. It's a good question.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to punt that until later if we don't think that it's going to be something that people are going to think is a breaking change after 1.0. I guess that's the real reason I brought it up, is like,
That's fair. That's a good
if it's a breaking change, we should just bite the bullet and do it now. If it's not, then it sounds like it's not urgent. Steve, what were you going to say?
Yeah, one thing, I don't know if it's relevant, but we were thinking of creating node pools just for game servers, and using labels there to kind of select them. So would that kind of remove the need for this, or does it go deeper?
One, yes, you should definitely do this.
Yeah, there's actually a separate issue for that I didn't put on the agenda, because I figured that was just sort of everybody should know that that's a best practice.
Yeah, we
should
have
add it to
that
the docs.
documented, but it's only in the Helm section.
Yeah.
And how to do it. I actually have it to do on my personal to-do list, which is like pull that out and put it in like the installation stuff. I would like to completely rejig the installation stuff, so it's a big, not just one big massive page of crazy. But that's, yeah, questions and priorities. I'd love to split that out per install type and per cluster creation type, and have individual pages and make that a lot simpler to look at. But yeah, Stephen, if you want to look at the Helm page, there's actually how to create a node pool that already will work with the taints and tolerations we have for the controller and the game server pods, to set that up for you already. So you can actually just steal it.
Cool, thanks.
At least for GKE anyway.
Okay, so the next thing I stuck on here was discuss upgrades. So I think in my mind, like the two sort of really big things we need to do before we can sort of cut a 1.0 and say we have stable APIs is make sure that the APIs are stable. So that's the thing we discussed earlier about splitting out the API groups and renaming things to V1 and committing to backwards compatibility. And two is having an upgrade process. So with our sort of relatively rapid release cadence here of being every 6 weeks, we need to have a way for people to move from one version to another. And so, like Steve, you guys are sort of already doing this. So I'd love to hear sort of what your experiences are so far. I think Mark wrote up in one of the issues that like the safest way to do this probably is to create a new cluster and to sort of drain into the new cluster. Is that something that you think would be reasonable? Do we think we need to really support like in-place upgrades within the same cluster from 1.0 to 1.1 to 1.2? Like we can write up procedures. Do we think we need automation before 1.0, or can we add that afterwards, as long as we have manual processes that we know work? So I think I've been sort of going back and forth about this in my mind of like, where's like the bar for 1.0? Like what would people be happy with, as we cut the 1.0?
Yeah, I think we're pretty happy with what we've got now. I mean, we do have basically two clusters. We have the current version and the previous version, so we can, we upgrade, do the tests in QA on a completely different environment, but then we can, at least on the previous version cluster, we can do the upgrade there, and then release that one. Or we can do, as suggested, like a blue-green deploy as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely possible. Maybe it's just good to have documentation for kind of recommended way of doing this. I guess the dream would be to do like a rolling update and just say, oh yeah, just upgrade and it will kind of work and drain, but that's quite a big ask, I think, for 1.0.
Well, I guess that's the question, is like, are people okay with us sort of cutting 1.0 and running production services if we don't have that, right? Like, is that a requirement for 1.0, or is that a nice to have for 1.0? Like, and I think we will build that eventually, right? The question is, are we okay calling something 1.0 without it? And I think one thing I was going to mention earlier is like it's awesome to see that you guys are running a production service on Agones now, because one thing Mark and I talked about was it's hard to call something 1.0 until somebody's running something in production, because you don't know if it really works. And so you guys, are sort of taking some of the arrows and doing like the pre 1.0 releases and giving us the confidence that we can call something 1.0 because people are using it for real. And so I think that's where sort of your feedback here is really important, because having being the one that's running some of the pre-releases, like making sure that we are at least supporting your use case, since you guys are doing that is important.
Yeah, so I think what we have now is great for 1.0.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think about upgrading from 1.0 to 1.0 also should be documented, or without touching the user's experience. Yeah, so both upgrading game servers and upgrading Agones itself.
Right.
Okay. So my
I was going to say, I think there are tickets for both of those. So there's a ticket for how to upgrade Agones, and there's a ticket for how to upgrade and manage your fleets. both of which are sort of documentation tickets.
Yeah. So if I have finished, my next question about some performance reference points. If we have cloud test cluster, so we can test and see some results against the same cluster. So I kind of interested when I doing some change, for example, some agent status services or others, how it would impact our experience, our performance, kind of this question. We probably don't have currently some measurements or to stick to them. Is it good to document it somehow, or for example, requirements, how fleet should be scaled before, for example, from 0 to 1,000 servers?
So I know Ilker has some handwritten tests on this, but he still hasn't open sourced them. But I know he's planning on it. He's got some stuff locally.
At least a lot of tests are open, so we can.
Yeah, we've got the Locus stuff, but he's actually got a really nice test where he can run it over multiple hours, and it like scales up to about 7,000 or 8,000, and then it comes back down, and like basically the game server set up so that it dies after a minute or two, and so we can start to see like allocations go up and down, and it's really nice. You need to like bug him and get that in. Actually, Robert, for you, I think that was one of the reasons we mainly wanted to move over to Prow, or at least start running Prow, was so we could do stuff like that. Is that right? Yeah,
we want to be able to run both post-submit tests, like just like periodic, like every half hour, rerun our tests to make sure we have, a signal that allows us to detect flakiness in a better way than just when PRs get created. And then also we can run like these longer sort of scalability tests automatically. Like we can say once a day, run this soak type test and let it run for 12 hours and then kill it. And then we'll start a new one tomorrow at head. And we can sort of see over time if that performance characteristic is changing.
Yeah.
So we might, for 1.0, if we want to cut it in the next 6 weeks, maybe we need to do some of these things manually, but we do want to get that automation put in place. Like as April was saying, after 1.0, when we start to rejigger some stuff with both Prow and with the GitHub org and so forth, I think that's going to be important things to get set up. So we reduce the toil of doing it manually as we are cutting releases.
What was I going to say? Would that be a good place to start with Prow? Maybe start with like those longer running tests, and then we can slowly move over all the CI stuff.
Yeah, no, I think the right way to do Prow, like, we should, like, I was this morning like, oh, I want to assign an issue to myself, and I'm not an editor on the repo, and I can't do that, and I have to go bug Mark to do it. Like, this is kind of annoying. Like the /assign and like some of those like interactive things would be super useful just to have set up right away. And then yes, I think the next thing to do is to do some of like the post-submit stuff and get that running, and then eventually move the pre-submit stuff over, because the pre-submit stuff's working like that. We shouldn't mess with that first. We should take advantage of the features that we don't have right now first, right? Okay, so I think the action for this is to bug Ilker and make sure that sort of other people can reproduce his test environment.
Okay.
The last thing that I wanted to I added in was we're getting docs help. So especially as we talk about, stuff going, getting ready for 1.0, we have someone who, his name is Riggs. You may know him from, he's been doing a lot of the Istio docs. So, excuse me. He's going to help us out with some of the Agones docs, just doing kind of a consultancy review of what we really need to get. He's going to do a friction log and all that good stuff that we need. So he'll be working on that, and hopefully we'll have something that we can look at. I think next week is what he said. So keep an eye out for some tickets maybe that we can, kind of make some edits. And if you're looking for some easy, well, I won't say easy, but if you're looking for some non-code contribution, docs is always something that we'll need it. And the great thing about having Riggs is he can kind of help us focus on what's, the most important. So that's going to be huge for us. So I'm very excited about getting that help.
That is really exciting.
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard for engineers to look at their own docs and decide whether they're good or not.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree with that, and that's why I want help, because I know, like, I've been working on this project since day one, so I know there's probably trees that I can't see in the forest.
Cool. I stuck one last thing on the agenda after your last thing, April, which Mark had put a comment related to upgrades, is talking about how we can upgrade Kubernetes underneath Agones. So like when we want to switch from 1.12 to 1.13, sort of what does that look like? And I have some thoughts on this. I think that, so if upgrading Agones, if the thing we write up first is move to a new cluster, like then that also can handle the upgrades of Kubernetes under Agones, right? When you move from Agones 1.0 to 1.1, and we said with 1.1 we're now on 1.13 instead of 1.12, you'd create your 1.1 Agones cluster on 1.13 and move over, and everything should be fine. I think the tricky part comes when you start talking about the in-place upgrades, both of Agones and of Kubernetes underneath Agones. And if we're okay sort of punting that for now and saying, like, this might work, it should work, but the best practice is to use a new cluster, and that's kind of what we're going to support for 1.0. We can punt that a little ways down the road. We are going to want to start testing this in the sense that when you upgrade Kubernetes, you're going to want to make sure we have our like pod disruption budgets and graceful termination periods and all that sort of set correctly, so that the node upgrades don't kill stuff that's being used. I think that's where like the trickiness comes in there, is verifying that stuff is actually working correctly. And on providers like GKE, I know there are some sort of hard timeouts on those values. Like you can't set them to be infinite, because then you'd never be able to actually upgrade your nodes. So we need to make sure that those parameters are actually working for people, where, if your game instance needs to run for a really long period of time before you can safely drain it, then you aren't actually going to be able to safely do an in-place node upgrade. You're going to have to either roll to a new node pool or a new cluster. So I think there are some sort of tricky edge cases there as we sort of talk about upgrading the Kubernetes version underneath Agones. But if we're starting off with the standpoint of we have a version of Kubernetes that we've tested Agones against, those kind of come together, and the safest upgrade path is rolling a new cluster and draining your traffic over, then we can sidestep the issue for a little while.
Yeah, I think for us that's certainly fine for 1.0. We do actually will upgrade underneath. We will reuse the cluster in our case, so we are sort of doing that rather than rebuilding, but we'll see how it goes.
But when you are doing the upgrade underneath, you're doing it while it's drained and it's not actually serving, right?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's not serving, it's just that we don't tear it completely down.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the thing. The risk is if you do it while you're serving, hitting the edge cases where you're accidentally killing things at the wrong time, right? Yeah, I think reusing the cluster when you're not serving, like you no longer have active game servers that you're accidentally going to kill, and so you're basically just rolling, your fresh nodes, right, that are ready for the new version.
Cool.
Is that all we've got for today? Anybody have anything else they want to talk about? Or we had a full agenda today. That's kind of awesome. And I can't tell, Robbie, is it you that's taking notes?
Yes, I've been trying to when I'm not talking.
You are awesome.
Robbie.
Thank you. Just shows anonymous narwhal on my end, so
Yeah, I've never figured out why when I'm signed into my Google account and logged into a Google Doc, I show up as anonymous to other people. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah, that is weird, because when you comment, it clearly shows that it's you. We could probably file a bug for that if we were so inclined. All right. Well, if nobody's got anything else, then we can wrap it up for today. We are getting into the crazy conference time of the summer, so just a simple caveat that our next meeting is scheduled for July 25th. I feel like there's something going on that week, but I don't know. It's not on my calendar. So just a heads up that we may move stuff around as needed to accommodate whatever big crazy conferences are coming
I will be in Japan because Cloud Next is the week after.
I knew there was something. Excuse me.
And then you'd also mentioned, April, at the beginning that we might try to shift the time a little bit.
Yes.
And so I guess for the people that are here, does half an hour later work for everyone?
Yeah, that's fine for me.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Cool. And we can always adjust things as needed. But I think maybe 9:30 will be a good compromise between the West Coasters who don't like being up that early and Mia who doesn't want to stay all night.
Just make it a little later for Stephen.
All right, then. Yeah, so it sounds like maybe with July, I mean, we'll talk about July. As for if we pick a different date, we may do it the week before or week after, or the week after would be August. So, but then again, in August, that week that we have scheduled for the meeting is Open Source Summit North America. So we might change things up a bit. Summer's always fun when it comes to conference planning and everything else. But I'll send messages out and get all of that on the calendar for us for any changes that are made. And if you have any big conflicts, please let us know. So we want to make sure we can accommodate as many folks as possible. All right, other than that, happy Thursday. Have a good rest of the day or rest of the evening, depending upon where you are. And we'll chat soon. Thanks, everybody.
See you later.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, April.
Thanks, April.
Thanks.